Hey guys, Zach here, and today I want to talk to you guys about what happens when you leave a tank to do its own thing for 6 months. Over these 6 months, I have noticed that there are a couple of things that have changed in this tank, and I'll go over the main 3 that I saw in this video. This was the tank 6 months ago, and as you can see, it was quite dark, a little dingy, and the plants were very unruly. So I started off this project by giving it a very good trim up, and just getting everything neat and tidy to start this 6 months. I also cleaned up the moss. I was very worried about trimming it just because that means it can spread all over the tank, so I tried pushing it back in, and I eventually removed a couple chunks of moss as well. Now, all of this commotion did stir up the residents in the tank, which at the moment was just a bunch of cherry shrimp. Now, these shrimp were doing excellent. You can see that this is a big mama. She is actually buried. I couldn't get it quite well, but there's so many hiding spots that there's a bunch of them that you'll see from time to time. I finished off the prep for this experiment by getting a small school of fish. I got a couple of black skirt tetras. This is a long tank, so they've got plenty of room to swim around and really just do whatever they want. Six months later, and the tank is looking very good. During these 6 months, the only thing I did was feed the fish and top up water in the tank so that it didn't get too low. And that was all of the maintenance that I did for that entire 6-month span. Over these past 6 months, obviously there have been a lot of small changes, so I just want to go over a couple of the changes that I really noticed. The first change I want to talk about is just the plant growth in this tank. There has been a lot of growth in this tank over these past 6 months. I'm not running any CO2 on this tank, so everything that has happened in here has been pretty consistent. And obviously the floating plants have really taken over this tank. Like, they took off almost immediately. There's a mix of frogbit, salvinia, water lettuce, and duckweed, so they completely covered the surface of this tank. One thing I did notice though was that the plants in the lower regions, like this crypt, they didn't grow as fast, and they actually started to slow down quite a bit. And I think that's because as the upper areas of plant started to fill in, the light in the lower areas actually started to get much lower, which means that they just had less to work with, so they grew a little bit slower. Another thing I noticed with the plants was that after the first couple of weeks, the growing actually really slowed down for everything, not just the ones in the lower layers. And I just think that's because there was no stimulus that sort of forced growth. When you cut plants, there's a stimulus that spurs the growth, but leaving it like this meant that there was nothing to stimulate growth in these plants. The second change that I noticed in this tank is this layer of mold that has built up over the past 6 months of this tank running. This mold is not a bad thing at all. It is just the dead organic matter that has started to fall to the bottom. So any dead plant leaves that the plant shed or anything that dies just ends up in this mold layer. So you can see that there are a bunch of dead snail shells. When snails die, they just sink to the bottom, and this layer starts to build up. It's not bad. The snails love it. The plants love it. Everything in this tank will kind of sift through it just to try and get any of the nutrients that are left, and then the mold should sink into your substrate. However, I think that I made it a little bit too thin in this tank, and the mold can't properly integrate into the substrate, which is definitely an oversight that I would change if I was going to do this again. A nice thick substrate layer can absorb all of this mold that does eventually build up. The last change that I noticed, or better yet noticed was lacking, is any algae growing in this tank, which really did surprise me over these 6 months. Obviously, having absolutely no algae in the tank after 6 months of no maintenance really did surprise me. I was quite shocked when I was looking at it, just waiting for the day when I could see a big algae bloom, and I just didn't, which was quite a pleasant surprise. Obviously, I'm not just saying there was no algae. I scoured the tank. I looked in the moss, which usually has a bunch, even in the stem plants, which sometimes has some. I even looked through the floating plants just to make sure there was nothing floating up on the surface, kind of blending in, but there was just nothing. I even looked all over the rocks in this tank to see, but I really couldn't find anything. There wasn't even really anything on the glass, which I'm really happy about, but it was still quite a surprising thing to see in a tank that had no maintenance done to it for 6 months. Having no algae in this tank was already surprising enough because there was no maintenance done on it, but no algae was also surprising because I was running 10-hour days in this tank, which is more than I usually run on tanks, and it was in front of the window, which really shocked me. I think the main reason why is because of these terrestrial plants. They just take in all of the extra nutrients, which just doesn't give the algae a chance to grow. These are all of the changes that I've noticed over these last 6 months. Obviously, there are probably some smaller changes that I didn't really notice. For example, like the snail population, I didn't count them before, and I'm not going to count them now. Same thing with the shrimp, I didn't count them before, and I'm not going to count them now. But I don't want to leave the tank in this state, I just want to give it a quick little cleanup once over. So first thing I'm going to do is just remove some of the floating plants. There are just a lot, and it's blocking the light inside the tank from reaching down into those lower layers. So the first thing I did was just remove some of the floating plants with a net, and then I removed some by hand a little later. After this, I wanted to trim up some of the stem plants and just replant them back, which just gives the fish a little bit more room to swim around, as the plants had started to creep into the foreground much more than before. After the stem plants and the floating plants had been managed, I decided to pull out some of the moss and push some of it in. It just was really starting to reach out, and I'm worried that if I leave it for too much longer, the underside of the moss is actually going to start dying and wilting away, but the top surface is going to look good, so I'll think it's all good, but I don't want that to happen, so I'm just going to kind of rearrange all of this moss. This is before the trim up, and this is after the trim up. As you can see, a lot more light is getting to those lower layers of the tank, which I'm super happy about, and it's really looking quite good. It seems the fish are also enjoying it because they're just swimming around, exploring all of these spots that are now opened up. But I had a lot of fun doing this experiment, and I definitely think I'll do something like this in the future again. But that is everything for this video. If you guys have enjoyed, please consider subscribing. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.